Alright guys, Aquatic Bob's here. Welcome back to part 3 of 16 things that you need to know before setting up a saltwater reef tank. Let's get into it. Okay, number 11 is the amount of time and work that is required to keep up with the hobby. So not just starting it up, but to keep up with it. So every tank is different. We talked about that. I look at my tank and in some ways compare it to having a kid. Right, Elian? Right. And in a lot of ways, it is kind of like having a kid. And you got to take care of it. You have to feed it. You have to water it, of course. But yeah, there's days where I spend a lot of time just doing little things, just adding food, phytoplankton, adding amino acids, adding different little rocks, to this thing to try to get mushrooms to stick to. There's days where I spend, even like later today, I'm going to go in and I'm going to be cutting up a few mushrooms. So some of these guys are going to be cut up and fragged. That takes time. I'll be doing some zoanthids along the wall over here. That takes time. And, all this stuff takes time. And even to clean the glass once every three days or so, that takes time, especially when you have a bunch of frag racks all over the place. That takes a lot of time. I have to go in and actually hold the other side of the frag rack and move it up and then reattach it, because if I just slide them all the time, it actually starts to scratch the glass. And I learned my lesson with that over here on this side. Let's see if you can see it. Yeah, there's one. It's really hard to see, but yeah. So lots of scratches over here. That sucks for $1,000 tank, But so everything takes time maintenance wise, and that's why I think we talked about it in one of the parts of video 1 is, do you really enjoy taking care of your tank? Because if you don't, and it's like a unfun chore to you, it's kind of going to suck and it's going to get old and you're not going to want to take care of it anymore. But if you love it and you appreciate your tank, you're actually not going to mind spending time with it. Your family might mind a little bit, but that's where you got to be able to work things out with your family too. We talked a little bit about that as well. But so yeah, just keep in mind that there's going to be lots of things that come up that are going to take time. I shared it in a video not too long ago. One night I came out here and I was ready to plug my pumps back in. I'd finished feeding. It's really hard to see in there, but one of my return pumps is down there. And I plugged it back in, and it said that there was an error and it couldn't start. And it was right at like 10:15 at night, right when we wanted to go to bed, had work the next day. And I was like, oh great, this sucks. And well, thankfully I was able to just take it out, and I think I just disconnected it really quick, disconnected the power, and then took the front of it off and kind of banged on the impeller a little bit, and it started up. And the next day I completely took it out and cleaned it out. I'm guessing maybe just like a little rock or pebble or something got stuck in there, but you never know when something like that's going to happen. And I've had it a few times in the middle of the night. I'll go back down here again. Is my auto top off, I hear it beeping, or my wife hears it beeping. I come out here in the middle of the night and the water levels drop down a couple of inches, and because a snail climbed over the sensor and it threw the sensor off. So yeah, you just never know. Like, anything could happen, and it's going to take time to readjust it. And like everything in this hobby, you don't want to make any big changes quickly. So if something does go wrong, you want to be able to catch it right away before it gets so far out of line that you have a lot of correcting to do. So just be prepared to spend some time, and if you are just starting or thinking about getting into the hobby, that's you need to be willing to make time for the tank. That leads us to number 12, knowing that sometimes things will just go wrong. And sometimes things are just going to go right. No matter what you do or how you respond, some things are just going to go right, some things are just going to go wrong. Kind of like we just talked a little bit about. You never know when a pump's going to go out. You never know when your heater is not going to shut off and just keep heating up the water, or it says that it's on, but it's actually not heating it up at all. And so, I mean, that's why I have, fail-safe things in place that monitor the water, and all those things do cost money. But so it's better to be prepared for if something goes wrong than to think everything's going right and find out later that something's wrong and have to try to figure out what it is, or make big adjustments or corrections later on. And sometimes things just go right. When I fragged up these zoanthids here a few weeks ago, I had cut so many. I've already sold quite a few of them, and I put a bunch down in the sump down there too. But I was just like, man, I'd been cutting for hours, and I got to the point where I was just like, all right, I'm just going to cut off bigger pieces of these. And as I started cutting off bigger pieces, it actually was easier to separate them into smaller pieces, and which is something I had never really seen happen before. And they all made it. Like every single one of them made it, except this one here, which I think is sitting right back there somewhere. I just need to grab it and reconnect it to the plug. But they all made it. And the ones that were really shaded out from being way over on this side of the tank here, and they weren't getting any light, so they got really dark, kind of like that one there, they're all coming back. And so, I mean, that's something that it's just going right. And I didn't put all this extra work in. In fact, it was kind of a gift, kind of a blessing. So remember the story of this guy. I just got him shipped to me, and he almost completely bleached out, but you can see that he's still got his polyps out and still got some color in him. His center turns blue, so I'm hoping it'll come back. But that's another thing that it just went wrong. There's nothing that I could have done about it. I pulled it out of the box, acclimated it, and it was already bleached out from shipping. But hopefully it'll come back, and that'll be something that turns back into a right. So you never know when something's just going to go wrong or just going to go right, but it's part of the hobby. It's going to happen. Hopefully for you, things will go right more often than wrong. But when we're talking about living things, anything is possible, and every tank is different. So again, 2 thoughts. Number 1, it's better to do your research beforehand to know how to be able to deal with situations when they come up and be able to address them or fix them if you need to, than to have to try to do some research in the heat of the moment and maybe just take the first piece of advice that someone gives you, even though it might totally be wrong. And the second thing is to have patience and be willing to spend time looking into it and taking care of it. So number 12, know that sometimes things are going to go wrong and sometimes things will go right. All right, that brings us to number 13, patience. Patience is a virtue. I hate hearing that, but it is. So here's an example. I just got this coral shipped, and unfortunately it wound up being 2 days shipping. It got held up by UPS. UPS, oh man, I get so frustrated with them sometimes, but it's Saturday and they wound up delivering it, so I'm thankful for that. That's something that went right. But it was wrong that it never got delivered next day in the first place. And so I acclimated it, dipped it in some Lugol's iodine disinfectant, But the patience part of it now is just waiting to see how it's going to respond. It's a blue-tipped gold torch, and I'm hoping that it's going to make it. And I'm hoping you can see some of the gold still in it. I'm hoping that it's going to bounce back, but it looked pretty rough, and there's a little bit of brown goo and gel stuff coming out of it, and kind of has me worried. But yeah, so you gotta have patience for stuff like this. You don't just throw it away and give up on it, but you put in some time, you put in some effort, and you take care of it. You give it what it needs. Make sure it has food, not too much light, not too much flow. Give it the best chance that you can. But yeah, so just an example of having patience and letting things come together by doing it the right way and not rushing something. I can't even count how many times I go online and people just got a shipment of coral in, and the very next day they're complaining or confused as to why the coral doesn't look the same as it did in the picture. Well, number one, most people that sell coral edit their pictures or use filters that cause it to look almost unbelievable. Um, but number two is a coral that goes through shipment gets stressed out, and when you take it out, oftentimes it just doesn't look the same. It's going to take some time to come back. It's going to take some nurture and some care for it to come back. But with patience, you can bring it back and make it look. In my case, a lot of my coral looks better than it even looked before I bought it. And it's hard to wait for it. Trust me, it's hard, especially when you have super nice acropora like this one. If you look up on Top Shelf Aquatics Circus Freak, yeah, but it doesn't even look closely the same. But it's starting to get some of that color as it grows. And there's the Miss Piggy, Top Shelf Aquatics Miss Piggy. This is the Top Shelf Aquatics Haymaker. Oh man, oh, I've been waiting so long, but they're starting to get more and more of their color, and the more I keep dosing nitrates and taking care of the tank, the more that it's starting to reveal its true colors and how beautiful it really is. But like I said, some of this just takes some time, and consistency is huge. Consistency, time, and patience.